Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1158 for April 19th, 2026. Coming up in a few minutes.
There's one distiller named Podge in Ireland. And at the end of all that he's trying to teach us, he says, if you wake up every day and say, I haven't made my best whiskey yet, you're on track. It's when you wake up and say, this is my best whiskey, that you probably should stop. So that's what we try to do. Make the next best whiskey we can.
Scott Neal is a former Green Beret who served in Afghanistan right after 9/11. He and his fellow soldiers were known as the Horse Soldiers for their exploits on horseback, and when it came time to name their bourbon, Horse Soldier was the logical choice. We'll get the rest of the Horse Soldier origin story, along with their plans for a 4th of July blowout at their new distillery in Somerset, Kentucky, later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the week's tasting notes, behind the label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast, whiskey's longest-running and most awarded podcast series.
Hey friends, it's Gabriel with Jewers here. If you're watching the U.S. Open this year, or you've got Father's Day coming up and you just want to get it right, there's a bottle that I would keep an eye out for. I'll explain.
Let's begin, as always, with the week's news. We'll start with the latest on Brown-Forman. The Wall Street Journal reported this week that Sazerac is offering $15 billion, or $32 a share for Brown-Forman. That's a premium to the stock's current price of $29.15 a share. Sazerac and Brown-Forman both declined to comment on the report. Meanwhile, Pernod Ricard is still in the bidding. Company executives told analysts this week that talks with Brown-Forman are ongoing, but declined to be more specific. A $15 billion price tag would be the second highest ever paid for a spirits company. Suntory paid $16 billion for Beam in 2014 to create Beam Suntory, now Suntory Global Spirits. The ongoing war in the Middle East is cutting into Pernod Ricard sales. The war has shut down travel retail sales in Dubai and other affected airports, and Pernod executives told analysts they now expect a 3 to 4% decline in net sales for the full fiscal year. Austerity moves in China have squeezed sales there by 7% for the third quarter, and sales in China are down nearly 25% year to date. Sales in the U.S. were down 12% for the quarter, but India reported an 11% gain in sales. Moet Hennessy saw sales bounce back in the first quarter of 2026. LVMH's wine and spirits unit reported a 5% gain in revenue, but cautioned that the Middle East war could cut into sales. Moet Hennessy owns Ardbeg and Glenmorangie scotches and Woodinville whiskey in the U.S. Now for the latest on the Uncle Nearest receivership. Court-appointed receiver Philip Young has told the court that the company is insolvent and could be forced to close within 30 days unless lenders pump more money in. Uncle Nearest has been relying on nearly $4 million in cash infusions from Farm Credit Mid-America, which is trying to keep the company alive in hopes of collecting on its $108 million in defaulted loans. Taking into account sales, expenses, and receivership fees, Uncle Nearest had a net cash flow of just $119,000 for the first 3 months of the year. In other news, former Proper 12 frontman and creator Conor McGregor has settled a lawsuit in Dublin filed by a former sparring partner. The settlement came just as Artem Lobov's lawsuit was to be heard in court. Lobov claims he was responsible for coming up with the idea for Proper 12 and was promised 5% of the proceeds. The settlement amount was not disclosed. McGregor was reported to have made $130 million from the sale of Proper 12 in 2021 to Proximo Spirits. Buffalo Trace has released its oldest bourbon on record. The Eagle Rare 30-year-old comes from the experimental Warehouse P, which is designed for long-term maturation with a more Scottish-like environment. The first 2 bottles will go in the auction block at Bonham's starting this Friday and running through May 8th as part of a larger sale of Eagle Rare Expressions. After that, it'll go on sale for $12,500 a bottle. Golf's PGA Championship comes to the Philadelphia area next month, and Heaven Hill has released a special edition of Elijah Craig to celebrate the 108th edition of the tournament. The whiskey is bottled at 108 proof and will carry a recommended retail price of $36.99 a bottle. Speaking of golf, Loch Lomond Whiskies has released this year's Open Championship commemorative bottlings. The Open Special Edition 2026 is finished for 6 months in Argentinian Malbec casks and is priced at £45 a bottle. The Open Course Collection 2026 is a 19-year-old single malt finished for 6 months in tawny port casks. Only 3,000 bottles are available, with a recommended retail price of £195 a bottle. Gordon & MacPhail has created a new range of single malts under the Spirit of Scotland banner. The initial tranche includes a 15-year-old Glenelgan, a 14-year-old Pulteney, and a 9-year-old Tormore. No word on pricing. Murray McDavid has also created a new range. The Aficionado collection includes a 34-year-old Mortlach and a 34-year-old Bowmore, priced at £649.95 each, along with a 35-year-old from the long-gone Imperial Distillery. It's priced at £699.95 a bottle. Spirit of Yorkshire Distillery is about to celebrate its 10th anniversary in June and has released 2 new single malts. The Filey Bay Porter Cask No. 2 is a follow-up to the initial Porter Cask release, except that this one was finished in porter beer casks for almost 3 years, compared to 8 months for the first release. It's priced at £85 a bottle through the Spirit of Yorkshire website. There's also a new flagship Marrying Strength single malt. It's bottled at 50.1% ABV, compared to the standard flagship release at 46% ABV. Marrying Strength sits between cask strength and bottling strength and is the final stage before reduction to bottling strength. It's priced at £70 a bottle. A Spirit of Yorkshire single cask bottling is part of the 5th edition of the Impex collection from importer Impex Beverages. The tranche includes 8 scotches, 2 world whiskies, and an 18-year-old rum, including whiskies from Linkwood, Tiernick, Dalhuin, Blair Athol, and Isle of Rassay. They'll be available at whiskey specialist shops in the U.S. No word on pricing. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. Let's open up the calendar now and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. The Ultimate Spirits Experience takes place this week from Wednesday through Friday at the Wynn Resort in Las Vegas. Sagamore Spirit Distillery in Baltimore, Maryland has a 9th anniversary party this coming weekend with 3 days of tastings, cocktail classes, and tours from April 24th through the 26th. The Whiskey Fair is Saturday and Sunday in Limburg, Germany. Tickets are still available for the Brandy Library's Japanese Whiskey Spirit School Saturday in New York City. Moonshine University in Louisville, Kentucky hosts a Stave and Thief Society Executive Bourbon Steward course on the 27th. The Dam Pub in Meaford, Ontario has a 40 Creek Whiskey Dinner on the 28th. And the Lunar Rogue Pub in Fredericton, New Brunswick has a Balvenie dinner that same night. Finally, the Spirit of Speyside Festival gets underway April 29th and runs through May 4th. Tickets are still available for many of the festival's events. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Every year, we've been releasing a Dewar's 19-year-old Champions Edition alongside the U.S. Open, a limited-release whiskey that's directly tied to the tournament. Now, 19 years is not a number you see every day on a bottle of whiskey, but in golf it kind of makes sense. The 19th hole, that round after the round, where the stories usually are a little better than some folks' scorecards. This year, the championships at Shinnecock Hills in Long Island, and instead of just putting that on the label and calling it a day, we build it into the whiskey. After 19 years of maturation, this whiskey's finished in Cabernet Franc wine casks from Wolfer Estate, right there on Long Island. So there's a real connection to the place, not just in name, but in the liquid itself. On the palate, you'll get some of that red fruit, with a bit of floral lift and a touch of spice from the higher ABV, but it still drinks like Dewar's. Honeyed, soft oak, balanced, nothing is out of place. It also lands right around Father's Day, making it an easy gift. Limited release, once a year, with Shinnecock Hills on the bottle. Great for golf fans, but just really a well-made whiskey. Keep an eye out for it. Copyright 2026. Dewar's is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 43% alcohol by volume.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Glendalough Irish Whiskey. Horse Soldier Bourbon gets its name from the horse-mounted soldiers who entered Afghanistan shortly after 9/11 to take on the Taliban. Former Green Beret Scott Neal was one of those soldiers and founded Horse Soldier with some of his Army buddies after retiring from the military. They've been building a distillery in Somerset, Kentucky that will open with a 4th of July celebration this summer, and have now released a 13-year-old Liberty Edition bourbon to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States. I sat down with Scott Neal recently at a Filson Spirits Society tasting in New York City. How did you guys get started in bourbon in the first place? Because none of you had a bourbon background except as drinkers, right?
Partakers, yes. Very interesting. I had gotten out of the military, and I think like anybody who's in transition, you try to find the next journey. And John, previous service member, I got to know him in the Tampa Bay area because I would do a lot of charity events, and there was John being very generous and Elizabeth being very beautiful. And I knew step number one, I needed a mentor. And I asked John one day, I really want to start a business. I don't know what it is, right? I don't want to go back into government service. I want to live this American dream. And John said, you know what? When I get back from Yellowstone, we'll go somewhere and we'll sit down and talk and see, what you're interested in. And I'm like, Yellowstone? And at that point, I realized I had not been on vacation in probably 17 years because of what we were doing. And John said, you know what, why don't you come with me? So him and Elizabeth invited me and my wife, and we went to Yellowstone for a month. And we spent time climbing the Tetons. We did fly fishing for the first time. It was just that kind of come back to nature. And every day, John and I would just talk, about our past and other things. And the last 10 days, we did a horse and mule train through the thoroughfare. And you're just alone in your thoughts every day. You give back the horse, you're just dirty and crusty. And we were riding out the West Gate, and we saw a little sign that said, free tours and tastings, turn here. And I think it's like anybody who kind of starts their bourbon trail or their distillery trail experience. You come in for the first time, and you get to meet the family, who's running it. And I remember Elizabeth just sitting there with the wife at the bar talking about packaging, the feel, the texture, the touch. After a while, Coco goes, well, really, how much do you make it for? I don't understand the business. Why did you stop everything you're doing and make vodka? It was the Grand Teton Distillery. And then the husband said, hey, would you guys like to see the still? And we're like, oh. So then you see, science in motion. And we stopped everything we're doing on that Yellowstone trip, checked out of the Airbnb, and started a 3-week journey back to Tampa. Of course, John's mom said, you drunks need a hobby. And we had realized right then and there, we had more fascination about something we didn't know about together. It occupied every conversation we had. We called our other friends we served with. We went to Scotland. And actually, there was a former Royal Marine who started a new Scotch distillery and said, hey, I'll get you past the velvet rope. I'll put you to work. And we went and worked in that Scotch distillery, Wolfburn, for a while. Came back home, and actually you'll see a gentleman here, Matt Bennett, who just did a series of documentaries in Ireland about Irish whiskey, said, hey, I'll contact them. Do you guys want to go visit them? And so that kept going and going. And this is really before the Google age, so you had to ask questions. You had to touch things and smell things, and you got, like Kung Fu, each distiller's approach and why this was more important than that. And you never would have got that if you just read a book, right, or read the back of the bottle. Fast forward to 2018, they came out with a movie. The movie, was about the story of horse soldiers. And here in New York City, they had a world premiere, and we asked them if we could just bring a couple bottles of this bourbon we had been making for a couple years. We had no interest in selling it. It was just meant to be us sharing ourselves, and they said, sure. And we literally photocopied the America's Response Monument, the statue, on a bottle, brought it into Lincoln Center where the red carpet was, and that's what began the brand of Horse Soldier.
And that's a nice short story.
It took us a long time to get somewhere. Like, I don't want to be cheesy, but so does bourbon, right? So once you determine to do something, how long does it take you to know what to do? And it's been 10 years of every day, us three friends, the other folks in the business, just being curious about, have we made our best whiskey yet? So every day is a family argument. Right? It's a taste, it's a sip. And there's one distiller named Podge in Ireland. And at the end of all that he was trying to teach us, he says, if you wake up every day and say, I haven't made my best whiskey yet, you're on track. It's when you wake up and say, this is my best whiskey, that you probably should stop. So that's what we try to do. Make the next best whiskey we can.
Tell me about the new edition.
As you can tell our backgrounds, we just love America. We love the idea of America, the opportunity of America. As soldiers, you're on the front lines doing all these things in places, and one day dreaming about coming home and doing what? Just living the American dream, this idea. So as the 250th was approaching, we kind of saw it last year, and we said, we've got to do something special, right? We just can't red, white, and blue the package and call it commemorative. But we also wanted to be so different that we let Elizabeth free on the design. So Elizabeth is such, a thoughtful person when it comes to visuals and beauty and design that you can't interrupt her. So she went off. Everything about what we presented out the outside of the bottle, she heard us when she talked about freedom, the Statue of Liberty, right? Every year we go to France to go to D-Day to commemorate those. So the bottle came from France. The colors, the texture, the touch, the weight of the bottle. And then we spent a lot of time tasting a lot of barrels. And they had to be 13 years old because of the 13 stars of the original colony, right? So that all came together very quickly, and we said we only wanted to produce 1,776 of these. So that was our shot for probably the last big American birthday we'll all be involved in.
Tell me about your 4th of July celebration, because you're finally going to open up the distillery.
When we sat down and said, now's the time, construction's underway, we're probably 85-90%, we said, it's time for a party, right? We want to bring our friends and family. And we realized that July 4th was probably the most meaningful thing we could do, and we set the narrative as the biggest small-town 4th of July celebration in America. I grew up at a time when there was VFWs, the guys marched down the road, you had hot dogs, there was flags, there was a high school band, and that's exactly what we wanted. So this year, Professional Bull Riding is actually doing a special ride series on the 4th of July. So, 2 days of just bull riding, Americana, fireworks every night, country music concerts. So everything that you can be so proud of and say, this is the moment in time we've arrived, is going to be the 4th of July this year.
Also, tell me about the decision to sell to Gallo and what that meant for you guys. Because that's the thing a lot of these startups deal with is, when do you sell off?
Well, when you say sell, we didn't sell. We created a partnership when we were thinking about the next level. And when you think about the next level, you've got two decisions. I can get out and I could say, man, I really won because I've sold something, or I could find a partnership. And we knew we had more to go with this brand. So actually, we started talking to everybody came. We were a really fast-growing brand. And John had one litmus test, and the person we sat next to or at the negotiating table, we asked their cell phone number. And out of all the people we talked to, Ernest is the one that says, here, let me give you my cell phone number. We'll be dealing with each other. And it created a partnership. We needed Gallo's distribution. We needed their understand for marketing and brand building. We didn't need the money. And what I mean by that is the money, because of our past, it was inventory. Their investment and partnership into us allowed us to build that facility to think about 100 years. So we'll be this brand for the next 100 years. Our partner will be Gallo. And it took a lot, 17 of us trying to match up with 6,700 Gallo's employees. We're a little rebellious at times. It was the best move we can make, and that's given us the legs to go further and faster.
Gallo also now has Four Roses. Was that going to create a conflict of interest for you guys, or how are you going to resolve that?
I giggle a bit when I saw the transaction because I thought it was brilliant, and it shows you the mind of the Gallo family moving into a direction. I see it as a great brotherhood. I will go toe-to-toe with Four Roses any day, but I know I need to learn for the next 60 years what they have learned as a brand, so I'm excited for that. We get to focus on maybe our weeded expressions, which I'm a big fan of. They have spent 100 years plus building Four Roses, and so we have a lot to learn because we want to make Horse Soldier a 100-year brand, so I think it's all positives.
The Horse Soldier Liberty Edition bourbon is a limited edition release. Just 1,776 bottles were produced, and part of the proceeds from each bottle will be donated to the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island Foundation. You can get more details at the Horse Soldier website, and we have a link to that site in the show notes for this episode at WhiskyCast.com. Thanks to Scott Neal for joining us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Glendalough Irish Whiskey.
Our story begins in the wilds of County Wicklow, the Garden of Ireland, a place where nature moves slowly and meaningfully. Some whiskies blend in. Glendalough Double Barrel stands apart. I'm Rowdy Rooney, head distiller here at Glendalough, and I personally oversee our whiskey making process from start to finish. We do things slowly, and we do them right. We start with a smooth, single-grain Irish whiskey. We age it in flame-charred American oak for soft vanilla and a honeyed depth. Then we finish it in Oloroso casks from a small bodega in Spain. Casks we season and ship ourselves to make sure the wood is still alive with character when it arrives. That kind of care gives Glendalough Double Barrel its rich layers of dried fruit, warm spice, and signature smoothness. This is a whiskey at its own pace, and it's worth every second. This is Glendalough Double Barrel, crafted to stand apart.
This week's tasting notes are brought to you by Lost Lantern Whiskey. This week, Heaven Hill released a new batch of Bernheim barrel-proof wheat whiskey. Batch A226 is bottled at 62% ABV, and the nose has touches of wheat bread with orange marmalade, caramel, honey, and dried fruits. The taste has notes of baking spices, orange marmalade, apples, honey, and a hint of apricots, while the finish is long with lingering spices. I'm scoring the Bernheim barrel-proof batch A226 a 93. I mentioned Hard Truth Distilling's new line of 7-year-old whiskeys a couple of weeks ago in the news and received samples of them the other day. Let's look at the 7-year-old wheated bourbon now. It's bottled at 58.05% ABV, and the nose has touches of baking spices, toasted oak, molasses cookies, honey, and vanilla. The taste is spicy and bold with black pepper, allspice, cinnamon, and a hint of ginger root, along with touches of molasses and honey underneath. The finish is long, dry, and spicy. I'm scoring the Hard Truth 7-year-old wheated bourbon a 92. And finally, Dram More Spirits has a new tranche of single cask bottlings for the spring. Let's look at the 18-year-old Pulteney single malt. It's bottled at 49.5% ABV, and the nose has apples, peaches, soft spices, honey, and vanilla. The taste is tart and lemony with lemon pepper spice, tree fruits, honey, and a hint of brine. The finish is long, tart, and peppery. I'm scoring the Pulteney 18-year-old from Dram More Spirits a 93. This week's tasting notes are brought to you by Lost Lantern Whiskey. Lost Lantern is changing how people discover American whiskey. Lost Lantern is not a distillery. They hit the road and hand-select special barrels from some of the brightest craft distilleries in the United States. Each release is limited, often a single cask or a blend they create in-house. The label tells you exactly where it comes from and who made it, so you know the story behind what's in your glass. Lost Lantern, shining a light on the independent spirit. Let's open up the WhiskyCast community app now and see what people are talking about this week. Had several comments on last week's interview with William H. Macy and Sean Kenyon of Woody Creek Distillers. Hugo Dart posted this from Brazil. Your very interesting interview with William H. Macy and Sean Kenyon makes it clear that they have a genuine partnership, which makes it a rare exception to the many celebrities who simply lend their name and image to whiskey packages, but have no real connection with the brands and may not even like the spirit. Had a lot of comments on the report that Sazerac is offering $15 billion for Brown-Forman. Alan Chanel posted this in the app. So this is clearly a purchase, not a merger. If they'll be taken private, it seems, Sazerac would be a better owner than Pernod Ricard. Not too long ago, it was surprising to see Brown-Forman stock down to $32. Now, that may be a competitive bid. Things change quickly. And after looking it up, 11 months ago, Brown-Forman stock was above $33 a share. Triple H had this comment. A new reality that the industry has to deal with is that the younger demographic is not into spirits. My guess is that in 20 years the cycle will repeat and interest in spirits will increase again. I hope it doesn't take that long. And NTX Matt posted this comment from Texas. How about no sale? Too many industries are seeing too much consolidation. Meanwhile, For Pete's Sake is giving himself a Fagile challenge. 40 and 10. 40 years of Fagile and 10 years since our last visit. We split our time in Isla and the Highlands. I traveled for the whiskey, but fell in love with the country, people, and stories. Can't be there in person this year, but we'll celebrate in spirit, pun intended, while getting samples ready for a whiskey compadre. I am challenging myself to post the tasting notes and backstories each Phage day, with only the bottles currently in my collection. I had to be creative. Let's see how this goes. Sláinte. That should be an interesting challenge. I can't wait to see what you come up with there. If you have a comment, question, or a suggestion, we'd love to hear from you. Download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store and join the conversation. You can also find us on social media. Look for WhiskyCast on X, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. This week, let's talk about teaspooning. It's the practice of adding a small amount of whiskey from one distillery to a cask of another distillery's single malt that's being sold to a broker or independent bottler. Of course, that now means it's a blended malt and can't be sold under the original distillery's name. Why would a distiller do this? Largely to protect their brand equity in a very competitive market, while still allowing casks that don't meet the original distillery's needs to find a home. William Grant & Sons is probably the most ardent user of teaspooning. It's one of the reasons why you very rarely see independent bottlings of Glenfiddich or the Balvenie. Adding a little bit of the other distillery's whiskey to a cask is not enough to change the flavor that a blender may be looking for, but it keeps that cask from being sold as a Glenfiddich or a Balvenie. There's also another less well-known reason for teaspooning. Scottish law requires that all single-malt Scotch whiskies be bottled in Scotland, but it is legal to export blended malt in bulk containers. That's how whiskey makers send large quantities of whiskey to markets like India or Japan while staying within the law. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, and, of course, a complete archive of our past episodes going all the way back to 2005. We'd love to hear from you. Look for WhiskyCast on Blue Sky, X, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook. Our email address, comments@whiskycast.com.
Our latest release of Dewar's 19-year-old Champions Edition, finished in Cabernet Franc wine casks, made for the 19th hole, and one worth having around when you get there. Keep an eye out for it. Cheers, friends.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2026, and comes to you each week from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.